Hello and welcome. Just going to do a quick sound check. Kiersey and Carrie, if you could just confirm you can hear me all right.
Yep, I hear you fine.
Thanks so much. All right, well, it's 12 noon, so I want to respect everyone's time and get started. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. We're so glad you could be here today. My name is Liz Hill, and my co-host is Kiersey Aline. We both work in the Ombuds office here at CUBoulder, which offers confidential, impartial, and off-the-record consultations and services for all faculty, students, and staff. We realize there are many resources for how helping people work virtually these days. And our hope is that these short sessions will provide some tips and considerations that go beyond what you might find online and give you some tools that you can start using immediately. Our objective, of course, is to help you mitigate conflict. For the past 7 weeks, we have all had to navigate many major changes all at once. We are simply not only adjusting to working remotely, we are changing our work environment while at the same time dealing with a global pandemic, sheltering in place, and making a transition either alone or with many others, trying to figure out figure this all out, right? While partners, roommates, children, and family are also living, working, and learning in the same space. So today we're speaking specifically to the surface level of how we work virtually, and we encourage you to take these other factors into consideration when you are engaging with others. We all need a little extra space and grace these days. All right, some logistics for today's sessions. You are in listen and view only mode. Thank you for staying muted during the course of this presentation. We will be using some polls and asking open-ended questions throughout the presentation in an effort to keep you engaged. So please go ahead, open up your chat boxes now if you haven't already. This is what you're going to use to respond to any open-ended questions so we can all see and share what you have to say. If you're not comfortable sharing in that format, please, there's no need to do so. You are also able to ask questions in the chat box. So while I'm presenting, Kiersey will field any technical issues or questions you're having, and then she'll go ahead and park other substantive questions there until the very end of the presentation. We'll have about 10 minutes for questions and answers at that point. If people have specific situations they want to discuss, we do ask that you contact the Ombuds office and schedule a separate consult for that. We will not have time for that today. We aim to keep these meetings at about 30 minutes to provide you some bite-sized amounts of information and then get you back to your day. We are recording this session. You may have seen me hit record, and that is so that we have these on record and available, if you will, so others who could not attend today can still watch. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So today's topic, as you can see on the slide, is building trust online. We're going to talk about 4 ways to boost trust among remote teams. All right, defining trust. Trust means different things to different people. If any of you have read Speed of Trust or taken the workshop, you know that trust boils down to character, which is comprised of integrity and intent, and competence, which is comprised of credibility and results. And there are also 13 trust behaviors that we either do well or not so well, and that of course can vary from time to time. When we do those well, we promote trust and foster trust. When we don't do them so well, we do gradually erode trust. So at the end of today's presentation, I am going to share with you more information about that book and also the workshop and where you can, who you can contact to sign up for that workshop here at the university. And for today, we are going to use Stephen Covey's definition of trust, which is having confidence in a person's character and competence. As Patrick Lencioni explains in his book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, trust is the foundation for functional teams because it impacts everything else. It is the confidence among team members that their peers' intentions are good, which requires getting to know each other, understanding each other's standards and values, having a good idea of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and being able to give and receive constructive feedback. Trust also means that team members must be able to be vulnerable. When mistakes are made, admitting those mistakes. When frustrations occur, having a healthy team atmosphere to air those frustrations so everyone can move toward a solution. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give you your first poll question. And this is a very easy yes or no question. So just go ahead and think about your current team. And the question, or actually it's not even a question, it's a statement. I feel there is trust among my team. Yes or no? Go ahead and answer this question and let's see where things stand. I'll give you about, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds. Thanks so much. I see about 75% have voted. If you haven't voted and you wanted to, please go ahead. These are anonymous, so I can't see who's saying what. All right, three more. Okay, I'll give you another second. If not, we'll go ahead and end the polling. All right, so 77% of you said that yes, you feel there is trust among your team. So that's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. And 23% of you say no. You don't feel there's trust. So my thoughts for you as we move forward is for those that answered yes, spend the next 20 minutes or so that we have together, thinking about ways that you can further bolster the trust that you feel already exists. And for those of you that answered no, I hope that you'll take this opportunity to start thinking about things as we talk about them that you might do differently or that you could encourage on your team to start extending trust or building trust among others. So that's my hope for today. All right, I'm going to go ahead and minimize that for now. Thanks for doing that. All right, so why are we even talking about this? Why is trust important? Well, as you might imagine, when there's an absence of trust, things can deteriorate, right? People start to hide things, hide weaknesses and mistakes. They don't ask for help. There's not that psychological safety. Maybe they start withholding information. They jump to negative conclusions. It starts to waste people's time and energy. People hold grudges. They dread having to work as a team or have team meetings. And this, of course, all ends up resulting in a lower morale, right? And low morale, then lower productivity. And ultimately, people don't feel good about it, right? They don't feel good about being part of this team or being here and may leave. So this is why trust is so, these are some of the reasons why trust is so important. So take a moment in your chat box, think of a time when you've been on a team with low trust. For some of you, it might be right now. For some of you, it might have been a team you've been on in other parts of your life. What did you experience or observe? Go ahead and use the chat box, and I'll go ahead and take a look at that and just start sharing that. I will, give you about 30 seconds to a minute or so to do that. Thank you. Yeah, I see lack of communication. Yeah, people stop communicating. Micromanagement. Yes. People start controlling and blaming. Evasion, yep, misunderstandings, all excellent, excellent. And I love that you're using one words. These are excellent. And I don't know, there's one that says no response. I'm not sure if there's no response to the question or if it's no response to the team. They just stop responding to the team, which I do hear. I do hear that at the Ombuds office. That happens. And gossip, transparency. Yes, these are all excellent. Feel free to keep adding those, and they'll be there. You can all take a look. And think about, maybe there's things that are happening in your world that you hadn't really thought about. So take advantage of other people's experiences and observations to see maybe there are things that can be worked on. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to go ahead for the sake of time and keep moving here. All right, so continuing on with that idea, why is trust important? When teams do foster trust, here are some of the positive things, right? And hopefully that 77% of you who do feel trust on your team do experience and observe these things. People they do feel psychologically safe, right? They do share weaknesses and mistakes. They ask for help when they need it. They can accept input, right? And take it well. They give others the benefit of the doubt, and we're going to talk more about that. But as you can see, these are all things that start focusing your time and energy on the important issues, not on the gossip, not on the politics, right? Offering and accepting apologies. And if you need help with apologies, we have great resources on our website. And they look forward to working as a group. It's thrilling, it's motivating, it's energizing, right? So those are the things that you want to be looking for. So let's do the same thing. I'll give you about another 30 seconds. Think of a time currently or previously when you were on a team that had high trust and that extended trust to each other. What were those experiences like? What were your observations? Go ahead and share that. Yeah, space to grow, working harder. Yeah, it's motivating and energizing. Willingness to try new things. Yes, absolutely. When people feel safe, we start getting more creative and innovative and exploring new ideas, especially in this time, right, when we're all having to adapt and think of new ways to operate and do things. Oh, good. I felt comfortable asking for help just 5 minutes ago. I love that. That's great. Asking for help. And then, of course, being able to extend help, right, when others need it. Sharing our expertise and our wisdom and our knowledge. Yes, calling people out respectfully. Yeah, we're human. We're all going to make mistakes, but if we can hold each other accountable in a respectful and professional way, that's a great way to build trust. Okay, so I'm going to keep going, but feel free to keep adding to that chat box. I love it. It's fantastic, and hopefully we can all learn from each other, and you're learning from your peers here as well. All right, so now we're going to launch right into the 4 ways to build trust on remote teams or in remote teams. We're going to talk about creating a sense of unity, open communication, the importance of being responsive and reliable, and how to foster that personal connection even when we're in this remote environment. So first, creating a sense of unity. Creating a sense of unity is about recognizing that, we are all dependent on each other, right? And that that everyone's in the same proverbial boat. The boat, of course, being COVID-19 and this forced transition to remote work. Many of us were not working remotely prior to COVID. And the message that the team's success reflects on every individual. So first, benefit of the doubt. This is believing something good about someone rather than something bad, even when you have the possibility of doing either, right? Give them the benefit of the doubt. Next is establishing clear goals and expectations. Teams need a common purpose. This equips them to perform at their best and to have a clear path to success, right? It's easy to lose track, especially if you've got multiple people working on projects, to lose track of what everyone's working on, particularly when you're not in the same location as your coworkers. So having a progress tracking app or a to-do list app, some that come to mind that you may have heard of, Trello, Slack, Asana, Jira, Basecamp, those are all examples of apps that you can use that can really help your workflow. It'd be a great way to keep the whole team on the same page. Not only does it serve as a motivational and accountability tool, but it can also function as a way for team members to stay up to date on tasks and projects. You probably have heard, all right, of MS Teams and Google Drive, and these are both fortunately supported by our OIT department, and these are great collaboration tools. So many of you either were using them or are now using them. If you haven't, something to look at. And we're going to talk more about communication tools in just a moment. Finally, for this slide, promote each team member's strengths. Point out what each team member brings to the table. Everyone's going to, like I said earlier, have their own strengths. So, bring it to the group. Clarify how each team member's contributions not only complement the others and each other, but also how they play a part in the overall outcome, right? What are they contributing to the team's success? Next is open communication. And I know in some of the chat, some of the things, some of the concerns and observations were around communication. So I think this will hit home for many of you. But appropriate tools, especially when we're working remotely, we want to be intentional about choosing what communication tools we're using, and maybe even more importantly, how we're using them. So we're 7 weeks in, we're in our 8th week now of remote work. Probably by now you've been using different tools. So maybe it's more of an opportunity to sit back, look at the big picture and reassess what you're using or how you're using it. Because having too many communication methods, as you may have experienced, can become chaotic, right? And it then becomes hard to stay focused. So turning tools that are supposed to save time and increase efficiency then actually become distractions and reduce productivity. So we don't want to do that. So having communication protocols, right? The antidote to communication overwhelm is simply giving each tool or platform a specific purpose. So instead of leaving it up to each person's personal preference, work as a team to set up some guidelines. For instance, you might designate MS Teams for live chatting and urgent conversations, use email for messages that maybe aren't as pressing, can have maybe a day or two turnaround, designate MS Teams channels by content so you can really be organized and specify what you want to be notified on and not, depending on what you're working on. You have some control over that. One way to think about it is to sort it by asynchronous communication, which is that back and forth exchange that happens as schedules allow. And then there's synchronous communication, which is more the live conversations that happen in real time. So for example, asynchronous communications might include email, updates in MS Team channels, updates on project management platforms. This allows each person to read and reply at their convenience. Direct messaging can also be used unless your team has decided or decides that that's really better suited for the more immediate synchronous communication. So that's, again, a team decision. Methods, best for issues and conversate. These methods are best for conversations and issues that are not time sensitive. On the other hand, synchronous communication is when two or more people agree to communicate using the same method at the same time. So live chats, if you've ever gone shopping or done online service type websites, they have those live chats. That would be an example of synchronous communication. Video calls, online voice calls, telephone calls, those are the most common examples. And this type of communication can be in writing, but it might also, as I've mentioned, be voice to voice or face to face via video conferencing. This is the best option for when things need to happen quickly. Maybe you've got important questions you need to ask and get immediate answers to. Maybe you want to do some brainstorming and allow people to bounce ideas off of each other and get that active in real time feedback. That would be what these channels or these communication tools would be used for. And having a game plan is where you have to start, right? So you have to know and all agree how you're going to use these different tools in different situations, which helps avoid wasted time, frustration, and hopefully reduce or eliminate misconnections. Video, of course, and I want to mention, I did write an Ombuds article, and I'll talk more about Ombuds at the end here on March 29th about this exact issue of using different communication tools and how to use them. So I encourage you to take a look at that as well. And then finally, video conferencing, right? Make it a practice to regularly use video to connect, right? Really look people in the eyes with team members, make eye contact, get that personal connection to the extent possible. And I would recommend daily huddles, even if it's only for a few minutes each day, just to check in, make that connection. How are people doing? It doesn't have to be an hour-long meeting. It could be a few minutes each morning or at the end of the day. And then, of course, having regularly scheduled team meetings at least once a week to really have more of a substantive conversation that probably would have an agenda and warrant a lengthier meeting. Okay, so now we're moving on to being responsible and reliable. Much of the conflict we see in the Ombuds office is rooted in ineffective and non-existent communication. Mistakes and misunderstandings, are even more likely given our remote workspace, when we're not communicating in person. So this is why if, you take away anything today, over communicating in this remote work environment. Being responsive and being reliable is so important. People need to know what to expect and when to expect it. So first thing is, of course, developing good communication habits. And this, of course, could be a week-long seminar. But when working remotely, we're inclined to rely more on written communication. It's just the nature of the work. And so one of the biggest pitfalls of written communication, and I'm sure I'm not shocking anyone here when I say this, is its susceptibility of being misinterpreted and misunderstood. Without those visual and verbal cues like facial expressions, body language, intonation, and other signals that we as human beings use all day long, every day to determine meaning, messages can sometimes come across wrong. They may come across terse, angry, or rude, even when that was not what was intended. So, having fewer cues makes it difficult. And interesting, I'll share this with you. Research does show that friends, right, are no better than strangers in identifying tone and emotion in email messages. So that says a lot. Keep that in mind. So a couple of tips for this. Tip one, clarify. Clarify and keep your cool. It's worth taking the time to review each message before sending it, and maybe writing a few extra words, more than you might normally be inclined to. Again, over communicating, just to make sure your meaning is as clear as possible. And this might be a hard habit to start, but err on the side of being more descriptive whenever possible. And of course, also, as always, keeping in mind and being aware of cultural differences, right? Especially when it comes to different communication styles, personality, approaches to conflict and leadership. And again, these are all seminars in and of themselves. But the more you can over communicate and assume the best intentions, the better off you'll be. And of course, ask, if there's ever a doubt or something doesn't feel quite right, ask more clarifying questions before drawing a conclusion. If appropriate, emojis, GIFs, right? Why not? Make it fun, help humanize, clarify, lighten up the tone of a message if appropriate. And again, this will depend on your department, culture, and expectations. You want to make sure that you're remaining appropriate and professional. But the emojis and GIFs can really help provide expression and clarify intention. Focusing on transparency, it's easy to miss things, especially in this remote work, when you're not in the same office, and even with regularly scheduled meetings, especially when decisions are being made or things are progressing. So find a way to check in frequently and update your team members when decisions are made, when progress is made. Perhaps more importantly, help people understand why things are happening, why decisions are made. I can't emphasize that enough. Get feedback. What went well in that process? What didn't go so well? How can we improve things going forward? And share details and solicit input from others. This gives people a valuable opportunity to share their own experiences and provide input. It keeps the team invested in the success of the team, and it helps everyone learn from each other. And we all can do more of that. And then being consistent, being reliable is more than just showing up when you say you will and getting things done on time. It really requires showing up in the same way regardless of the situation, and this includes difficult situations, right? Making sure people can rely on you to respond consistently when there is conflict, when there are issues, when there are challenges. And next week, Kiersey will be sharing more about clarifying intentions. So be sure to register for next week's Lunch and Learn as well. Okay, moving on to calendaring and scheduling. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but it's a good reminder. Make it easy for team members to keep track of each other, what you're working on, when you're available. Stay updated. You're not in the same location, right? So you're not going to see people coming and going, especially if you're working different hours or you're working with people in different time zones. You really need to take extra care to keep track of when people are available and what's getting done, especially for projects. I think I mentioned this earlier, where there's contributions, right, from multiple people, really being respectful of people's time and aware of it. Sharing online calendars and schedules and posting updates about availability and time off are also great practices, especially when planning team events and activities. Really trying to make sure most people can be available to attend those is helpful. Okay, regular contact. I've mentioned this already, so I'll be brief. But it really, again, it's whether it's a daily or a semi-weekly check-in, be sure to do it, right? And share status updates. If you're using MS Teams, try to make sure your availability is up to date so people know when they can reach out to you, or when you're in a meeting, or when you're just simply not available. And this is true to when you're collaborating on projects and using project management platforms, okay, being able to stay connected and stay on top of what everyone's doing. And this, this regular communication is not only helpful logistically, but it also drives motivation and accountability, and it shows investment in the team, right? That we're all in this proverbial boat together. Okay. Finally, fostering personal connections. Be intentional. A lot of this is all about intentionality. When we're working remotely, things that we took for granted no longer exist. So, for instance, when we're in the office, getting to know your coworkers is kind of automatically, it's built into the fiber of the environment. We spend most of our week together, right? Working side by side, maybe having lunch together, taking breaks or walks. Maybe it's just commiserating over tough projects, chatting around the proverbial water cooler, right? Because of all that, teammates are bound to get to know each other personally at some level, to some extent. When you're working remotely, that's not happening. So you have to actually create it, be intentional about connecting. So personal updates, questions, icebreakers. One thing that can help is make space at meetings for casual conversation. Better yet, schedule informal social gatherings, right? Friday happy hours, Wednesday coffee hours. Perhaps start each meeting with a question from an article I'm going to put on the next resource slide for you, called 20 questions to ask instead of how are you doing, right? And it's by Elizabeth Weingarten. These are some great questions to stay connected and have a more interesting conversation that is not work related. So again, I did list this article for you on the next slide. So write it down and Google it. The virtual water cooler. Yeah, create an online space for this. It's a space to share non-work related and just for fun content. For example, right, a place to share music, shared interests, weekend plans, funny, inappropriate, of course, TikToks, recipes, etc. Right, having a separate space for these fun non-work connections and communications. One, it helps alleviate distractions from the work channels, right, and the work communications, but it also reduces that feeling of distance between net team members. It creates a sense of community. And so this might come in the form of an MS Teams channel. That's what we use in the Ombuds office, a chat room, a Facebook group, blog, really anything that can represent that water cooler feel. And then finally, celebrate successes, right? When you're working alone from a home office, you may feel disconnected, and you may even feel like your work is not even being acknowledged or noticed. So this is preventable, okay? If the whole team makes an effort to recognize each other's accomplishments and point out the good work getting done, both individually and at the group level, that helps, right? It could be as easy as a quick shout out on MS Teams or a thank you email. There's nothing that energizes a team more than feeling that they work together to accomplish something. So while I go on to the resource slide, I'd love for you to use your chat boxes and share, what are you doing? What is your team doing well? Let's learn from each other here and help each other to foster personal connections. What do you do? Tell me. I want to know. Okay. So like I said, as you're doing that, I am going to keep going so that we make sure we have time for Q&A. Ooh, I see we only have 2 minutes left. I talked too much. Okay, so here are some resources, and I am going to be emailing all of you a handout that highlights what we talked about today, and I'll have some hyperlinks to some of these resources. Okay, and then of course, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to talk about an issue, communication, trust, any university related concern, call us. We are available to you virtually. We do phone and Zoom. And you can also go to our website for more information about our office. So thank you so much for coming. I know many of you have to jump off, but I am going to turn over to Kiersey now to help me field some of the questions that came in, and hopefully we can get one or two of those answered for you. Kiersey?
Okay, hi Liz. One question that came up was, sometimes folks find these things intrusive. Can you speak to ways of managing people who need connection and people who find it safer to bring a specific professional identity?
Okay, so if I'm understanding the question right, when the question says sometimes folks find these things intrusive, I suspect they mean some of the more casual communication channels, like the virtual water cooler, the happy hours, the coffee talks. I mean, is that it looks like that question, I'm sorry to call you out, Rebecca. Rebecca, is that, am I hitting it on the, am I getting to the core of it for you? Can you just give me a signal in the chat box? Is that kind of what you're talking about? Yes. Okay. So yeah, I mean, we have to still respect people's space, right? So there's definitely a delicate balance of respecting people's personal space, right? We don't, we're not required to be friends here at work, and also making sure we're connected in a professional way. So people are going to have their boundaries, and we need to respect those boundaries as to how far they're willing to go. I don't know that you would want to force anyone to join a social, to use a virtual water cooler or a social Zoom call. You can encourage it, offer it. It's available. People want to get together and connect. If they don't want to use that time for that, maybe respecting that as well. However, of course, on the professional side of things, if you have the communication tools in place and you've, as a team, set expectations for how they will be used, then in their professional capacity, they would be expected to use those the same way as everybody else. Does that help answer your question, Rebecca? Okay, I'll wait and see if, um, and then Rebecca follows up with, yes, are there ways you might frame that it's okay to just bring the professional self to connect? Sure, sure. And I think I think I understand what you mean by that. Like, you don't have to get there and bare your soul and share all your personal details, but you can still show up and use your own judgment for what you talk about, what you share, but to be present and to be connecting with your teammates, that's absolutely an option. And hopefully that will resonate with those individuals, and they'll feel comfortable and welcome in attending those forums. Any other questions, Kiersey? And I know we're 2 minutes over time.
That was the extent of the questions.
Okay.
So we're in good shape.
Okay, well, thanks again for those who are still on the line. We so appreciate it. And don't forget, next week we do have another Lunch and Learn. They're all listed on our website, so you can go there to register, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day.